All right, y'all. So we are about to get nerdy today. We've talked about what demand gen is, some common misconceptions behind it, how to properly define and measure marketing qualified leads, how to formulate a go to market strategy, why sales processes also need to be modernized in order for companies to be successful with the demand gen framework. So today, we're going to deep dive into 4 things that your company can do to take the leap from a traditional lead gen model to a demand gen one. I've had a lot of people that have asked me how to get started with demand gen. And part of getting started is a mindset change, right? Like actually wanting to do something different. The second part is some foundational work that can be done to set your demand gen strategy up for success. And today, I'm going to walk you all through 4 foundational tips that I think companies should have in place prior to beginning their demand gen journey. And if any of y'all know me personally, you know that I love to get nerdy. So that's exactly what we gonna do today with each one. So, for just the high level, 4 tips are number one is you need to operationally set up how to measure your demand gen model. Number 2 is you need to modernize your selling process to accommodate modern buyers. Number 3 is discontinue the mindset and the measurement of marketing campaigns to be one-to-one. And number 4 is audit and correct your content for a demand gen strategy. So let's dive into each one of these. Number 1, you need to operationally set up and configure how to measure your demand gen model. So if you're currently running a lead gen model and you want to make the switch to a demand gen strategy, all of your dashboards, triggers, routing, they're probably set up for a lead gen strategy. And if you don't fix this before switching to demand gen, you're going to either mess up your demand gen efforts or you're not going to be able to prove the benefits of it or potentially both. And a lot of companies, they measure marketing's impact on the set number of MQLs or even SQLs or SQOs. So marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, or sales qualified opportunities even. But where the lead gen model falls short is that they never actually look at how these MQLs, SQLs, or SQOs are ever reaching or impacting pipeline or closing, or looking at how long that sales cycle is for each of those opportunities to close. So when you're wanting to make the leap to a demand gen strategy, some of the things that are going to change is how you measure marketing. So you need to set up your systems to track and measure things like high intent MQLs and marketing sourced revenues and start to get that foundation set. So then as you begin to get those insights, you can start clearly breaking down what is working, what's impacting pipeline, and you can back into those insights to discover the steps and the journey that it took for that opportunity to close and then scale those efforts. Some of y'all, some of the things that I like to analyze from an operational perspective to support your journey to demand gen are things like your MQL notifications. So you need to trigger your MQL notifications off of high intent and hand raising forms only. And if you're currently triggering those off of like content downloads or webinar registrations or whatever else that's not hand raising, you're probably going to need to change that so you're only sending, those high intent leads to your sales team. You also need to add 2 opportunity source fields in your CRM for high level tracking and detailed level tracking. So here's what I mean by that. Your high level tracking is for things at like a high categorization, like marketing generated or sales generated, super high level categorization that we could easily at any point pull and see the difference between marketing sourced and sales sourced or partner sourced or whatever. However, you need those categorizations to take place. And the detailed level tracking is for the action that actually drove that opportunity to be created. So what does that mean? So when we think about a lead source, it's traditionally associated with either the first touch or the last touch conversion that an individual made in order to be acquired in your marketing automation or CRM platform. But as we've discovered throughout this podcast journey together, marketing is anything but one-to-one. So when companies only track the original or the first touch lead source, and they use that to automatically map into the opportunity source, that's false information. So here's an example. There could be a person whose point of acquisition is Zoom info because a sales rep was prospecting them. But the prospect never engaged with the sales rep, never opened an email, clicked, responded, nothing. So eventually they got marked in the CRM as disengaged or whatever, lead status fits that mold. And then the marketing team down the road picks them up with email nurtures, webinar promotions, ads, educational content, etc., and gets them to convert months later. And conversion here means that they actually sourced a demo request, a hand-raising MQL, okay? If reporting is tied to the original person's source and rolled up automatically to that opportunity value, it's going to show that sales sourced and closed that lead and that Zoom info was working. When what really happened is that, sure, sales sourced it, but marketing also nurtured it, right? There's so many more touch points that came into play to get it from point A to point B. Another point of recommendation here is that when marketing works on disengaged leads and gets them ready to have those conversations with the sales team, someone should always ask how that prospect heard about y'all. You could go about doing this two ways. Is one, you could add a how did you hear about us form field on your demo form to capture that intent or that data. Or you can train your sales reps to ask that question on their demo calls. The reason that capturing this information is valuable is because 9 times out of 10, that person will actually tell you what drove them to talk to sales. They'll be like, oh, I follow your podcast, or oh, I joined this webinar, blah, blah, blah. Whatever that source was the minute before they raised their hands to talk to sales, that's that minute opportunity source that we want to track. Because that's what's working to drive pipeline and quality conversations for your team. Acquiring contacts and converting contacts are two different strategies. And this is also important because at the end of a quarter or a fiscal year, when the leadership team is evaluating what's working, the investments per team, they don't end up just slashing marketing's budget because of this misdefined data. If they pull those reports and they see that sales is the only one that sources and closes revenue, then it's a no-brainer that they need to invest more in sales and not marketing. But that doesn't tell the whole story. So that's the problem with not knowing what's working with your marketing and the inability to showcase that story. Adding these operational fields and conversations enables the marketing and sales team to justify their investment and frankly, their existence as well. So, and lastly, this is also a great way to break down that wall and that competition between your sales and marketing teams and the need to compete and just obsess over attribution. Number 2, for modernizing your sales process, you need to modernize your sales process to accommodate the modern buyer. Again, what does this mean? So the episode before this one actually breaks this down a little bit further, but in short, when you run a demand gen strategy, you begin to attract highly qualified, interested people to your company. But you can't convert qualified, ready-to-buy buyers with an outdated, friction-full sales process. So in order to enable your highly interested and excited buyers to buy, here's what you need to do. You need to remove the SDR qualification calls from high intent conversions and send those directly to sales. It's kind of a slap in the face if I'm super interested in a product and the company is like, "Meh, hold up, but are we interested in you?" Like, what does that say to your prospect? It says that you only care about yourself and you don't value me and my time enough to give me someone that's worth my time. Now, that doesn't mean that SDRs are not time worthy. That just means that SDRs are really great at sourcing conversations and at bats for their AEs, their account executives. They are usually not the ones that can perform in-depth demos and have product conversations that are needed to strengthen the relationship and proceed to next steps. And so, because with a demand gen model, a lot of the learning and enthusiasm and product knowledge is there prior to that person asking to talk to sales, right? So, when you have that individual who has that level of product knowledge and a need for your solution, it only makes sense to send them to people who can help facilitate that conversation along. Traditionally, those are account executives. And traditionally, when those type of high quality conversations are sent to SDRs and not to AEs, it either slows down the buying process tremendously or it sabotages it entirely. For example, if a CEO comes to your website asking for a demo and an SDR picks it up and asks if they have a budget or a need or a team or whatever qualification questions that they need to ask, and then at the end of the meeting asks for more time for another meeting to then actually walk through the platform, that's going to piss off that CEO. Like, no, I wanted to talk to sales to learn exactly that, but instead you worry too much about if I was worth the time to be given that. So just think about, if you were in their shoes, what should that process look like to enable that buyer? And the keywords here are to enable the buyer, not us, the company, the sellers. What we need to be thinking about is the buyer. Which leads me to my second point in this modernization process. The team needs to back up what they promise. And it's surprising to me that we still need to talk about this one, but it's still happening, so here we are. Please don't offer a get a demo as a call to action if you're not going to be able to actually perform a demo on that first call. And the keywords here are on that first call. So if you're soliciting a get a demo CTA, then you need to be prepared to do some level of demoing on that first call. Here's why. If you ignore those points of friction in your sales process and you run a demand gen strategy to drive more demand, when that demand is all bought in and they're ready to convert, if your conversion points suck or your sales process is annoying, no one's going to put up with that and they're going to bounce. Which means that you literally just lost the conversion that everybody worked really hard to earn. And we don't want that. So number 3 is that you need to discontinue the mindset and the measurement of marketing campaigns to be one-to-one. In order to drive momentum, interest, and action, awareness is a must. And awareness is not a one-to-one comparison. It takes several touch points to gain that awareness, trust, interest, and the worst thing that you can do for your demand gen strategy is to expect a one-to-one measurement, point blank. If that's your expectation, maybe a demand gen strategy isn't for you. So here's an example. I could sell lemonade on the side of my street right outside of my house all day. And the only people that will ever see my stand and potentially buy my lemonade are people who either live on my street or visiting people who live on the street or just happen to stumble upon the street. So the reach of my lemonade stand is limited by the small amount of people who actually know that I'm there. Same with your marketing. If you only market to the small amount of people that know you exist, your growth is very limited. What if you started posting lemonade signs all around your neighborhood? What about all the common and nearby shopping centers? Now you're influencing people who might have thought about buying lemonade while they were out shopping and running errands and have the time to swing by and grab that cup of lemonade. or in the B2B world, grab a demo, right? So now what if you start telling people that you'll be here every Tuesday between 7 to 8:30 p.m. and if they come back and bring a friend, their cup is free. Now you're gaining hype, you're gaining incentive, you're gaining traffic, and week over week, you're going to start seeing that momentum at your lemonade stand build. But you're never really going to be sure how the word got around, where it came from, what happened. Of course, you could ask, right? But that's where it's not going to be a one-to-one measurement. You're just going to start seeing that momentum build. So the same translates to your marketing strategy. Number 4 is audit and correct your content for a demand gen strategy. So demand gen is about ungating content and allowing your prospects to freely navigate and learn on their own and then come to you when they're ready. So you need to be creating content that does exactly that. A lot of companies that are still running a gated content approach hide behind their forms to produce mediocre content. And they're able to do that because all that they care about is the contact acquisition of that person submitting their information on that form. They don't care if the content actually has value to transition the prospect to the next stage in the buying process because they're just going to outbound the hell out of this prospect now that they have an email address. What if you can no longer hide behind mediocre content and you needed it in order to drive conversations for your sales team? The purpose of curating that piece of content will be so much more thoughtful and educational. And that's what happens when you flip the script of saying this piece of content is not for us, it's for them, our buyers. So here's an example. I saw a native post from a company on LinkedIn, so not an ad. And it said, is your company spending enough on marketing? Are you optimizing your customer lifetime value? Should you invest in a platform to help you do this? Then it said, company ABC has everything you need to attract, convert, and grow your company. Check out this blog to make sure you're getting the ROI out of your marketing efforts. Like what? We went from, am I spending enough on marketing, to optimizing marketing, to analyzing ROI from marketing, to potentially purchasing a platform to measure marketing, to, oh, and check out this blog. Like what? This is a great example of what not to do. And I get this response often as well that, people aren't stupid. They could easily decipher the message out of this. Yeah, sure. But they're not patient either. So this one piece of content just asks them to do and assess like 5 different things. And it's very unclear what the exact messaging is that someone should get out of this one piece of content. And it's very much for the purpose of check us out, buy our platform, here's why you need us, and people can see right through that. So here's what you need to do instead. Each piece of content should be carefully crafted with one message in mind and one action in mind. And each of those pieces of content should ultimately roll up to that larger content strategy of the company as a whole. So be very precise with each piece of content that gets created. Be intentional with the message that you want to get across. And also don't say, if you're struggling to do this, then the first thing you need to do is buy our platform. Like, people want to learn. People want to be educated. They don't want to be sold to. And so you need to use your content to break down that defense mechanism from feeling like they're being sold to becoming a trusted partner or advisor that they can go to learn more about how to do something or why to do something. And if you do this, you'll start seeing way more reactions and comments about the content that you're producing, which will fuel the insights you need to continue creating even better content. So I hope that helps. Those are my 4 foundational recommendations for you all to take the leap and be successful with your demand gen strategy.